It appears that Bitcoin mining stocks were the real sell the news asset in the wake of the Bitcoin ETF approval. Names like Mara and Riot have been nosediving ever since the news was initially released, which is about a week ago at the time of recording. But I personally think it's about time to buy that dip prior to what I believe will be a rally into the halving in April. And apparently, as you can see, other analysts do as well. My name is Royce Jacob, and welcome back to Waves Capital. All right, so first things first, you guys, speaking of buying the dip, sharking up some calls, making some waves, those of you who are already subscribed or members of the portfolio would know that my money is absolutely where my mouth is when it comes to kind of the focus of this video. Personally, I picked up a whole bunch of Riot calls today, relatively speaking, of course, and I'm really excited for what's ahead. So right off the bat, if you guys do want to join Waves Capital for real, if you want to know how I'm trading my personal portfolio, all the calls in my portfolio, how I'm trading them on a day-to-day basis, along with the daily trade alert newsletters. This is just an example of a piece of this morning's trade alert. Then that is going to be the first link in the description. My complete portfolio and daily trade alerts and email newsletters. You can pick whichever pricing plan you want here. Try it free for 7 days if you want. And if you don't like it, you can always just unsubscribe. But I trust that you'll be sticking around. And, if you sign up, welcome to the winning team. That said, you guys, let me know in the comments down below. Are you bullish on names like Riot and Mara going into the spring? Are you positioned? You got some calls, you got some shares on deck. Just let me know in the comments down below. And of course, give the video a like if you do go on to gain value from it today. The breakdown of the video, we got 2 articles to look over, okay? This was just to show that Mara has been not looking good over the past week. But 2 articles, I think we're going to kick it off with the bad news first. These are both CNBC Pro articles by Tanaya Mashil. And Tanaya Mashil, once again, really pushing them out over the weekend. The first one we're going to go over, once again, bad news first. Bitcoin tumbled after a slate of ETFs launched. Here's why that might dent some crypto miners' profitability. So this is good to know. I shouldn't say this is good to know. I guess it's good to know. It's good information to have if you are positioned in Bitcoin miners, okay? Personally, as I just made very clear, I am bullish on Bitcoin miners going into the spring months. I'm personally very positioned in Bitcoin miners, Riot to be specific, more specific, going into the months ahead as well with call options and common shares. Okay, but it's important to understand kind of both ends of the argument. If you really want to be a good debater, you have to be able to argue for the opposition. It's a classic just rule of debate 101. But it's good for investing too, right? It's good just the more information you have in regard to what you're trading or investing in, the more competent you are in trading that asset. So we're going to go over this first. We'll then read into buy the dip in these Bitcoin mining stocks over the next 2 months. Bernstein says there are 2 names here. This kind of gives it away, but this will really fall into specifically what I'm doing in my own portfolio and, what I imagine many of you are doing as well, because that's, if you clicked on this video, then you're probably kind of on the same page. All right. Then to close it out, we will, of course, be looking at the charts. We'll kick it off with Bitcoin. I'll give you guys my short to medium term outlook on Bitcoin, and then we'll move into Riot and Mara as well. And I'll go into, late winter, moving into spring targets for all 3 of these assets. All right. Let's get to reading. Bitcoin tumbled. Investors in Bitcoin mining stocks are closely watching the price of the cryptocurrency after the SEC's move to allow spot Bitcoin ETFs became a sell the news event. After the ETFs received regulatory approval last week, the flagship currency briefly touched 49K. As the week went on, however, Bitcoin wiped out its earlier gains and notched a modest weekly loss of 0.01%. That's about as modest as it gets. Crypto mining companies are now feeling the squeeze in this latest Bitcoin sell-off, and that's evident in the big week-to-date declines for Marathon Digital and Riot Platforms, both of which lost more than 20%. First, the hash rate, the amount of computing power the Bitcoin network uses to process transactions, has been hitting all-time highs almost every week and hurting miners' margins, according to Reginald Smith, analyst at JP Morgan. The network hash rate has increased more than 30% over the last 4 months, he said, rising alongside Bitcoin's 157% in 2023. Second, investors are watching Bitcoin's price in the wake of the ETF's debut, because if the crypto doesn't rise to a range of $50,000 to $55,000 soon, smaller miners may not have sufficient capital to grow and may have difficulty maintaining their operations. Okay, excuse me. So it's important to keep this in mind, you guys. That's the issue with the halving. That is the negative aspect of the halving for Bitcoin miners. is the fact that the reason the halving event is bullish is because it cuts the amount of Bitcoin pumping into circulation, which comes through the miners, in half, okay? So pretty much the amount of Bitcoin that the miners are being rewarded is cut in half here by cutting the miners' revenue in half. Like, realistically speaking, it's being, the amount of Bitcoin they're being rewarded is cut in half. But the idea here is, at least in the bull case for miners, that the price of Bitcoin goes up so much that it kind of balances out. There's some mean reversion there in order in terms of the revenue that they're losing because the price of Bitcoin is going up. Okay, so that's good to keep in mind. Again, you guys, it's just good to understand these kind of things. It's good to be bullish. I'm bullish, but you need to be aware of the fact that, maybe we're not right. But again, money where my mouth is. This is just my opinion. And again, I assume it's a lot of yours as well if you're watching this video. Let's move on to the good stuff. Buy the dip in these Bitcoin mining stocks. Bernstein. Bitcoin miners have tumbled since last Thursday following the launch of the spot Bitcoin ETF. However, for some mining stocks, any weakness in the coming weeks is an opportunity, according to Bernstein. The declines are in part due to the pullback in Bitcoin, which is down roughly 6.6% in the same period. In a Monday note to investors, Bernstein also pointed to lower investor appetite for mining stocks as Bitcoin proxy now that ETFs have entered the market. However, GC, let that one rest, lead crypto analyst at Bernstein said the firm is still optimistic on high-quality miners, calling out Riot Platforms, which many of you know is the OG, is my personal favorite miner, and CleanSpark. We feel confident about inflection in miner cash flows for the best-in-class miners that are consolidating capacity and seeing strong traction in revenues from higher Bitcoin price and transaction fees, he said. Thus, miners would continue to offer higher beta trade to the next Bitcoin inflection, in our view, post-halving. Okay? If you guys have been tuning into some of my recent videos, you know that I actually think that a pre-halving rally is more likely than the historically favored post-rally halving. Or post-halving rally, sorry. The reason for this is because more people are just educated on Bitcoin. It's a pretty simple reason, but there's so much game theory involved in every aspect of investing and trading. Makes sense to me. The more people who are aware of the halving, the more will be priced in prior to the event itself, okay? So, historically, there is a rally in the 6 months that follows the halving. This time around, we're less than 6 months out now, but I think leading into the halving, maybe in the month or two prior to the halving, definitely after the halving happens, I do believe that Bitcoin will definitely be seeing a rally prior to the event itself, once again, as opposed to the years prior, because more people are aware of it, so it's going to be priced in. That being said, that's the two articles. Keep it short and sweet. Let's take a look at Bitcoin on the charts. Bitcoin right now, excuse me, you guys, is, holding up decently well, considering a whole lot of the market is not doing well right now. Bitcoin is right now technically just above my personal line of resistance. This is just as you can see here, these are not like true lines of resistance, but Bitcoin has been in somewhat of aside from all this ETF volatility we can see right here, Bitcoin has been printing somewhat of a bull flag pattern. Sharp move up followed by a symmetrical triangle. Even if this is kind of a very extended bull flag, regardless, it is still a symmetrical triangle pattern. And historically, at least statistically, symmetrical triangle patterns typically resolve in the direction of the overall trend, which for Bitcoin is clearly up. The macro trend is still very, very bullish, regardless of the recent volatility we've seen. So I do think that this ultimately breaks out to the upside. I will go over what I believe is an optimistic scenario, but very, very possible. By February, I do think that this line of broken support right here, short-term support that's only been in play in 2024, is only in play for about a week here. I do think that if all goes in favor of the bulls, if things continue to go in favor of the bulls, which I do believe is the case, obviously, I just want to preface this by saying that I do believe that at the Fed meeting at the very end of the month, I think the 30th is the FOMC meeting start. Although the CPI data, the December CPI numbers didn't come in super promising, I do think the Fed will still cut rates, potentially by 25 basis points. And I do think that that will be a net positive catalyst, for the markets into the month of February. Okay. And I do actually think that the markets rally into that event with that in mind. Okay, again, just my opinion, but that's a lot of what trading is formulating opinion, the most educated opinion based on the knowledge and data you have available to you. That's what I'm doing. Okay, so if all goes accordingly, once again, I do think that Bitcoin can come up to retest the line of broken support as new resistance. Just go by February 1st. This is about February 5th. So first week in February, that'll result in about a 25% move up over the next 2 to 3 weeks from now. Okay. So we'll see if that happens. If you guys are watching this at a later date, let me know if I was on par with this or if I was completely wrong. But that is my take. I'm bullish on Bitcoin in the weeks ahead, definitely into February, March. Okay. So with that in mind, let's move to Riot. Riot will go a little further out. So Riot right now, you like to see, we're up like 1.5% in after hours. That's nice to see. Very short term though. When it comes to the slightly longer term, or let's just reflect on what happened here, because this played out pretty damn well. This was a head and shoulders pattern that I was very worried about. And once again, if you guys were part of the newsletter, you would know that this is something that we're keeping an eye on for like the entirety of 2024 so far. Okay. Left shoulder came up. We saw the head. And then what was worrying me was this opposing but symmetrical shoulder line, or the range that we were trading in following the correction. Okay, so this head and shoulders pattern has now looks to have played out. We've corrected all the way back down to levels that we haven't seen since late November of 2023, and in total we've seen from the high of 1870 about a 40% correction. It's even a little more for Mara, I think. We'll take a look at that right after this, of course. But from here, because I'm bullish on Bitcoin, I'm obviously bullish on Bitcoin miners, although what we covered here, again, it will objectively dampen the amount of Bitcoin that miners are rewarded. I still believe that Bitcoin, the appreciation in Bitcoin itself will compensate for the lack in Bitcoin that the miners are rewarded, and, just kind of balance out revenue. So in the scenario that Bitcoin does climb into February, I'll go all the way out to March here for Riot. If Bitcoin can climb into February, break above $55,000, $60,000 into late February, into March, then I do think that Riot could over double from current levels and come up to about $25, too similar to Bitcoin to retest this line of broken support as new resistance. Best case scenario, if Bitcoin really rips into like the spring, summer months, and Riot crushes their earnings report scheduled for March 13th, it's probably going to be earlier than that, just knowing Riot and their history of not having accurate estimate dates or earnings estimate dates. I do think that best case scenario, Riot reclaims this long-term macro ascending channel. We make our way all the way up to about $42 by, when is that, like May? By April, May of this year. Okay. And again, if that does happen, if this trend line does come back into play, the longer it takes to test it, the higher the target becomes. Okay. And that's pretty much the same for Mara. For Mara, it's a little different though. So Mara, again, you guys, if you watched my last video on Riot and Mara, when we were floating around up here, like actually even over here. So I called it a little early. We saw another day or two of upside. But overall, my downside targets came pretty perfectly into play. And actually, we even surpassed my downside targets. And we're coming back down to this initial high right here from December 8th, which I do think will act as a strong floor. I don't think Mara personally falls below $17 probably, which is right around where we tested this morning. So from here, I think Mara probably goes sideways for a little bit, starts the trend back up. Again, the volumes here, the calls have been obliterated. The shorts, I shorted Mara pretty well, and we made a decent amount of money by buying Mara puts, which is pretty rare, but it was just so obvious. I've seen this one play out too many times to not. Over Waves Cap, we made a decent amount of money on those Mara puts. There's no chance I would short it here. I would go long Mara here. I would buy calls on Mara here if I wasn't just pretty much all in on Riot. Riot is my go-to miner, and that's my choice for a miner. But if you like Mara, hey, to each their own. That's all on you. And I would reinforce your opinion to absolutely dip by Mara here. Again, we have the floor that is the prior ceiling in the initial high of this rally. I don't imagine. I think it's very, very unlikely that we fall below this. Definitely fall below. I definitely don't think we fall below $16. Again, that's just my opinion, but it's very unlikely in my opinion. And I do think that Mara, when it comes to the longer term, let's just take a historical level of resistance into play. Just an area that has historically acted as resistance for Mara was around $44, $45. Okay. And if you're thinking about the like a good old two wave, a classic two wave pattern, that just looks about right. Right. So from current levels, we're at about $18. That's obviously over like 145, 146% climb from here over a 2x. But I think it's entirely possible that MAR gets back up to those levels in the months ahead, in the case that once again, Bitcoin performs as I expect it to. Okay. So let's just zoom out for Bitcoin really quick here. I do think, again, this is more short-term thinking. Best case scenario for Bitcoin, let's get rid of all these B's. I think the best case scenario for Bitcoin, keep in mind, this is definitely highly optimistic, but it's fun to talk about those things. The best case scenario for Bitcoin is in the case that we reclaim. And actually, if we zoom in here, you can see, I was talking about this in that other video too, broken supports acting as new resistance. We immediately got rejected by this line of previously broken support. Just again, to those of you, if anyone still questions, there's only a few of you, but if any of you still question the validity of broken lines of support, these stick figure trend lines, these broken lines of support acting as new resistance and vice versa are probably the best examples of how effective these trend lines really can be. Okay, so anyway, best case scenario, absolute best case scenario. And again, this is very optimistic. But if Bitcoin can reclaim this prior macro ascending channel and just start absolutely ripping into the halving and into the summer following the halving, then I do think that that's the route to $100,000 plus. And to be completely honest, I don't think that that's at all out of the realm of possibility. Just, again, giving the long-term trajectory of Bitcoin and giving the stock to flow ratio, the halving, etc. Supply and demand 101. The less there is with equivalent or greater demand, which I'm assuming is going to happen to Bitcoin, the higher the price is going to go. So that's the video, you guys. Again, if you want to know how I'm trading names like Riot or all the other small caps that I'm really excited about right now that you can kind of see, I'll just give you a little hint as to a couple of these, then that's the first link in the description. Once again, existing members of Waves Capital, I appreciate you. I'm super excited for what's ahead of us. And to all of you who are bullish on Bitcoin miners, let's ride. Until next time, you guys, always remember, take action, make waves. Peace.